Hey everybody, what's up? Circus here, coming at you with another meta-analysis video. I wanted to bring Rye in tonight because Rye has cast a lot of tournaments under the new ban list. And right now we're watching Battle Phase Monday on the screen here. This is the finals. This is Desperado versus Witchcrafters. So that was kind of cool to see Witchcrafters making a return into the finals, which is something we haven't seen for a very long time. But I
Yeah.
wanted to get Rye's opinion because there was, a big shakeup. Desperado's back, baby. Is it just too strong? I mean, we got rid of the strongest decks around, right? Shiranui, by our definition, was I don't know if tier zero is the right word, but basically is winning the power rankings by 20 points every week. To
hmm
us, that's super dominant. Tier zero, whatever you want to call it, it was doing that. So we get Shiranui out of here. But now we got Desperado. Are we just back in the same spot that we were before? Just another deck that everybody is gonna hate?
Desperado is definitely the deck to beat of the meta. It is very, very hard to argue that it's not the best deck of the meta at all. There were literally games on Monday and games on this previous Saturday, Damage Step, our large tournament, where we literally saw Desperado be in a losing situation, top deck their cup of ace, and then just immediately win the duel. It's very, very hard to argue that it's not the best deck right now.
Well, it
Especially
essentially has a
not
pot
during
of
the stretch.
greed built into it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It is
If you get
wild.
that turn one, it's just like pot of greed, and then you get another
Yeah.
one, pot of greed.
And if you look at all the statistics, for example, usually you see the most played deck, especially back in the day, Shiranui. Whenever they enter, a very small portion of them actually top. That's because there's so many of them. People play, all the outs, the Necro Valleys, and everything to out them. The difference here is you're seeing Desperado. You're seeing like 20 people enter with Desperado, and then like 10, like half of them succeeding
Yeah,
to
they have like
top,
a 50% conversion rate, whereas we'd
which
see
is
Shiranui at its
crazy.
best, which was like 40%. So
Yeah.
it's slightly
So
better. Yeah.
and we talked about this before, where if we get a ban list, it's not going to make the meta fun to play. It's going to just go back to an older meta. And Desperado, when that was king back in the day as well, wasn't even how powerful it is now. We have Karma Cut, Super Team Buddy Force. Like, it's crazy when you think about it. They have a free Karma Cut. This is something people don't realize. Like, if you have a Dark Monster on the board and you have Karma Cut and Super Team set, which is very common because you play 3 of all those cards, so it's very common, and you have a draw 2, so you could potentially have that very easily turn 1. You Karma Cut the Desperado out of your hand, discard it, take a card out, you activate Super Buddy, the Desperado from the grave comes back on the field. You just Karma Cut someone
For
for no
free.
cost.
Oh my
you
God.
know, like no deck really does that
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
gross. That is so gross.
So yeah, all the other decks they really can't compete, and it's hard to play those floodgates against Desperado. You try to system down them. Misjudge ain't a machine. That's not gonna work. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like,
Right.
she's still gonna be relevant. You have to get through her. So that's like you can kind of do it, but not really. Um, and again, because they can draw so much, usually they can rebuild a board after getting system down, unless they've really committed hard to their board. Um, and really the only two decks rather that's really seen any like consistent levels of being able to beat them are Witchcrafter and Noble Knights, which are two other decks that I think are you could firmly say are going to be in the meta. Um, but even then, the difference between because here's like the crazy thing. Back in the day, you'd just be like, yeah, if X deck goes against Y deck, X deck's going to immediately win because of the matchup. Desperado has a losing matchup to Noble Knights, but Desperado can just get extremely lucky with head judging, cup of ace, and karma cuts draws to like just get rid of the Noble Knight cards. So then their bad matchup doesn't even matter because they don't even play it. They just
Well,
flip coins to try to get around it,
yeah, and if
which
they
is
go first
weird.
too, right? And I mean, Noble Knights have a huge weakness to going second. I mean,
Yep,
you
it's
bring out
fair.
the Madrat, you equip it, you try to use its effect, and they steal your Madrat
Yeah, it's
with
pretty
the head
interesting.
judging.
Yeah, which it shouldn't even like be a thing, right? Like that shouldn't like no one would play head judging if they didn't have to, but they do just to trigger their skill. And if they draw, they're like, I'll just set it and see what happens. Like, what at worst,
Right.
nothing happens and it goes to the grave. At best, I win the game immediately because I steal a monster.
Right. It's just so terrible.
It's not even a good card. It's just they have so much draw power and so much. ability to just the guaranteed heads is just so crazy to make their other coin flip cards good that they can have one bad one, and even if like it doesn't necessarily work out, they're just kind of chilling on that. If you go back and talk to Grucius on my interview, which is actually super interesting as well, because Desperado was starting to be used in Casey Cup before the ban list at the very end when there was just no Invoker. Invoker was literally the only thing keeping Desperado out of the meta.
Right,
Uh,
the Casitas or whatever. They couldn't get around the
yeah.
Casitas.
And those top players, they were not playing Invoker on the final day, so Desperado was murdering everybody. So that's what Grushis said. Um, so he was just like, yeah, to be honest, I'd rather play like this Curiel card instead of the head judging because I don't want to randomly gamble for a win. But when you randomly gamble, sometimes you do win, sometimes you
Right.
lose. But when you win, it's gonna feel better than when you lose, so it's like more memorable. When it actually goes off and pops off. If you actually looked at it, head judging probably doesn't win that many games. It's just when it does win games, it's kind of like, all right, well, that was BS. Like that's so they
Well,
should probably fix that.
and there's plays too, like with the super team buddy force or whatever it's called. Like if you have a twin barrel dragon, you summon it, and for whatever reason it ends up in the grave. They use that super team and bring it back. It gets to do its effect again. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of plays. It just feels like stuff just keeps coming out, and they just have all these opportunities to destroy your cards, and
yeah.
they can break your board faster than you can rebuild
hmm
it most of the time.
I just think it's interesting because Desperado is already on the verge to coming the meta. A long time ago, we talked about the weaknesses and strengths of Desperado. It was a long video. A really long time ago. We talked about Meta Watch Desperado, and that was back when they played the Pertaplant version.
Oh, that's right.
Um,
Yep.
and we talked a little about how essentially if Invoker wasn't around, Desperado would run rampant, and probably become one of the better decks in the meta game. Um, and we're kind of seeing that now with Casitas being gone. And we also talked about how if we don't get a really good box, we're just going to get another meta that we've played already in the past, and that's
Hmm.
essentially what happened. The only difference being we got Noble Knights, which is fun and awesome and all, but like Desperado was a card that came out in I think 2015, 2016. Noble Knights, all the cards we have are like 2012, 2013. It's still a newer deck that functions as a newer deck as well. So, especially after seeing the leaks from the mini box, I don't see anything that'll make the Desperado matchup better for any deck. So I think Desperado is still going to remain that go-to deck. Now, in terms of being the tier 0 or whatever, like there's a lot of different schools of thought on what a tier 0 is from its statistics standpoints, which is something closer to the power rankings that we do. It's if like pretty much everyone that's topping on the power rankings would be Desperado. So you would see Desperado at like 30, 40 points, and then the next highest would be less than 10. That'd be like a tier 0, in my opinion,
Okay.
instead of just being 20 points higher. So the graph would have to look super skewed, like Desperado 40, second place, Blackwing 9, then
Okay.
I'd be like, all right, that's probably tier 0. And then from like a more, I guess if you're looking at tier lists, it would be more people putting cards that directly counter an archetype. So, for example, if people put System down, if people put Dark Imprisoning Mirror deck because they just assume their matchup is going to be Desperado. That's just how many are entering. Then that's when you start seeing that it's a tier 0, and the Desperado still wins. Like there's still crazy. Like that's for example, Ritual Beasts. People are heavily citing Poisonous Winds and Lancia and Chaos Hunter, and when they don't do that, we see crazy representation for Ritual Beasts. But when people do that, Ritual Beasts just get dumped on. You know what I mean?
Right. They just can't compete when that
So
happens.
that's not a deck that I would ever consider for like a tier 0 status or a tier, because it's like they're getting destroyed with the floodgates and they can't adapt to it. Where if a deck can adapt to it, like pretty much what Desperado does against certain sides, we'll see as we go into the next week. Because now that Desperados is the established king, for sure people are going to side deck for it. You know what I mean? So we'll see if the side deck matters, but I don't think it will because I've seen people play around all sorts of side deck cards. Just we like literally, I remember watching with -1 on stream. This guy was totally losing the duel. There was no way he was going to win that duel under any other circumstances. Top decks Cup of Ace, his last guaranteed heads, gets it. Okay, fine, that was your last heads. Plays another Cup of Ace, not guaranteed, gets 2 more drawn cards, and I was like, well,
There you
like
go.
he just drew 4 cards in a losing situation, he's going to win that duel no matter what. No deck can keep up with that. It's just
Right.
he's gonna have everything he needs, and he's gonna win, and he did. So sometimes Desperado just wins off of being lucky. So there you
Yeah,
go.
it's gonna be a one that we want to watch over the next week because is there going to be a box that's going to power creep it? Are we going to need, an emergency ban list of some sort? So we'll have to keep an eye on it. I did want to
Yeah.
touch on Witchcrafters though, because we are seeing them here in the
Mhm.
finals. Are they coming back?
I think Witchcrafters are good. I think people, I know there's like a whole bunch of people memeing on like the TPC and stuff about them
You
not
weren't
knowing
one of
how
them,
to.
were you? I can't remember.
I did not meme on them because, well, I didn't agree with Witchcrafter being like, the tier one deck, right? The one of
Right,
the go-to beat decks. I never agreed with that. I don't think anyone agreed with that
right.
realistically. I think, the first week, tier lists are always something you take with a grain of salt. But playing against them, you could tell like they should have a better match. They should have a better meta, right? Like when you think of the decks after getting the Shiranui and the Invoke nerfed, what decks came to mind? Ritual Beast, Witchcrafter, Kristrons, with the new version of Kristrons. Like these decks should, in theory, play good because back then we were thinking, well, Sidra is going to be the go-to deck. And if Sidra is the go-to deck, Witchcrafter should be good. Like I don't, like that should be a good deck.
Hmm.
Obviously, Desperado ended up being the go-to deck, and Sidra isn't even. To be honest, Sidra's getting smacked around.
And
I don't know if
let's do a
Sidra's even.
sidebar on that quick since we're already here. Cider, why? Why are they not doing as well as people had hoped?
A couple of reasons. They don't really win versus Desperado at all. It's like
Hmm.
you go in, you pop their cards. Desperado summons himself. Okay, let me pop the back row instead. Well, Super Buddy now just floats into another Super Buddy.
Yeah,
That
you have a good deck when your traps can float,
when your
right?
traps are floating, you're just like,
Yeah,
oh. So, it's just very easy to out resource Sidra. And they attempt to go for the OTK, and you have Temperance in hand. That's a searchable Temperance, by the way. So usually, if they swing through a monster, then swing to your life points, and then one of them you stop with the Temperance. And it's just very hard for Sidra to OTK a Desperado build. And then there are other matchups for like matching up against Witchcrafter, which is very hard as well because then they just turn off your names and then you can't OTK them because they're not Cyber Dragons anymore. So that's difficult for them sometimes. And then you've got decks like Noble Knights that float their equips. Actually, that's probably a little bit more favorable to them, but it's honestly whoever goes first will just win that duel straight up. Um, they just the cards that the decks that kind of have fallen into the meta are kind of pushing Cyber Dragon out of the meta. They're still topping and they're still getting far in tournaments because it's still Cyber Dragon at the end of the
right.
day. But I would not be surprised if that deck continued to kind of fall a little bit, especially if people start siding for Desperado. I think by default, Cyber Dragon might get hit with that as well. For example, the mirror could hit the Chimera tech, so you can't activate his pop back row effect. System down can of course hit them. Not that they care really about getting system down, but it's still an effect on them. Um, so Sydra's not a bad deck, but definitely a little weaker than the decks that are the go-to decks that we'll see, I think, moving forward in the meta.
Okay, so going back to Witchcrafters, then what was keeping them out? And now that it's gone, why should they be doing so well?
So Witchcrafters, what was mostly keeping them out was just every other deck being faster than them. Like they because they lost the charged light break. They basically can't play the Lightsworn version
Hmm.
anymore, at least not effectively. They just became super slow. And decks like the old invoked Neos that was just going crazy, summoning monsters, Purgatrio twice a turn, setting up traps like crazy, switcheroo for better cards. Decks like Shiranui, combo Shiranui would OTK you in one turn. It just wasn't. You just didn't have enough
Not
time
a
to
good
fight
meta.
both.
You couldn't get
Yeah,
set up fast enough.
yeah, especially after getting nerfed and you can't use your Lightsworn anymore. You can't get the setup because usually whenever you see a Witchcrafter player set up, their entire hand is empty, right? Because they have to play their entire hand to summon Shemitah, Pator to get more cards in the grave, and then the next turn is when they start taking over. Once they start getting those
Yeah,
cards back to their hand.
yeah, and one turn
Um,
is a killer.
yeah, you get destroyed. Like yeah, good job waiting a turn against combo Shiranui. They're just gonna come out and roll you. Like that's not gonna happen.
Right.
Um, so now the decks in the metagame are significantly slower. The fastest deck is Cyber Dragon, and that one the other thing I forgot to mention, Cyber Dragon's also less consistent than the other decks. They're really skill reliant, so as long as you don't pop the skill, and then they don't have a way to get their cybernetic fusion support without already having their God Hand combo, they're not gonna pop off that. They got to wait a little bit and hope they unbrick themselves. Where all the other old Dark Magician, right? Just circle rod,
Right,
magician,
right,
OTK, like just immediately, no need for skill, no need for anything like that. Just I need my 2 cards and we're good to go. We'll
right.
we'll win this duel.
Put your helmet on.
Yeah, so Cyber Dragon still helmet, but still more reliant on the skill. Uh, so Witchcrafters, they are now in a slower meta, so they can play slow. That's what Witchcrafter wants to do, and uh, just having that good Desperado matchup where they can constantly negate the Desperado effect, or just stop them from getting popped. It's really bad when you're like you use your twin barrel dragon, the coins go off, and then you get negated. That just feels really bad. So you know
Okay.
you lose your heads and stuff. So you can stall out Desperado and stuff. It's still a sweaty matchup. Like they gotta struggle to beat Desperado, and Desperado is usually side Necro Valley. So when you are playing that slow game, you're eventually gonna get Necro Valleyed and lose probably. Um, and also like decks like Witchcrafter, they are harder to play. So it is the better the player, the better the result, right? The person who got to finals is Buns, really, really good player. I don't think that many people in his position would have gotten to the same situation. I think a lot of people would have probably fallen to either Tri-Mids or I think he was playing I don't remember it was Tri-Mids and then someone else in the top 16. They would have probably fallen. There were really 2 hard matchups for him, especially Tri-Mids with the King Golem. You're like, how did you beat that? Like, and that was a really good duel. That one went to the distance. So, I really think it's player skill versus the deck as well. That's really kind of keeping Witchcrafters down. I still think it'll be a good deck in the metagame, and it's a deck that everyone's got to keep in mind. Witchcrafters, this is definitely a meta they can play in. But Desperado is going to be the one, the actual thing that you'll be playing against most of the time.
All right, I want to get into one more deck before we get out of here, and hopefully this next one doesn't take a half hour, Rye. But Noble Knights, that everybody keeps wondering. I think it's the number one question in our chat almost every stream is the deck worth buying? I think a lot of people want to hear you say no so they can feel good about not having to buy it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have the $20,
Yeah.
so it better be crap.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you guys. You will be seeing Noble Knights in the metagame.
But
In
hang
terms
on
of
real
it,
quick, we haven't really seen them top a whole lot, right? They kind of wash out in the top 16 area.
we see them top, but we don't see them go beyond top 16 yet. I think the highest they've gotten was top 8 so far in the
Okay.
first week. Yeah, top 8
Like two
with
of them, I think, yeah.
something like that. Um, I think Noble Knights are another deck where it's like people just don't know how to play it properly, because you see that, but then you also turn around and see Mythyard in Team Wars play 2 Noble Knight decks and win every single game. It was 10-1, and he won every single game with Noble Knights.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
He went
so
10-1. Oh my god.
yeah,
Or
so
9
it's
and
it's a
whatever.
it's a
Yeah.
really good deck. It also pushed -1's clan. PDS's clan used 2 Noble Knights in their main lineup, and it pushed them to a third round or whatever they use in Clan Wars, and it was a very close game. And it is the first Xyz era deck that's actually a legitimate deck. It's not like Water Shark that's like kind of a meme with a bunch of traps. It's
Right.
not like what other Xyz decks have we had? Is that it? I don't
Well,
know.
ones that work.
The ones that work, yeah.
I
This
mean,
this is
there's a ton of them.
actually
What are you talking about? There's like 2 in every box, but it
they're
doesn't
just
mean they
not good.
work.
Yeah, so this is like the first actual Xyz deck that's like semi-competent, and even this is like weaker Xyz
And
comparatively speaking.
well,
But
yeah, the cards float. You can draw
yeah,
from the deck. I mean, the only thing it's really missing is negates, right? It doesn't have any built-in
oh my
negates.
god, listen, Morgan's coming, and when she does, oh lordy.
Nah, but
But yeah,
not right
like
now.
yeah, not right now. I'm actually a believer that if the deck got any more support, it would actually go into like helmet territory and not be healthy for the game. They got to be real careful, because I do feel like this upcoming main box is going to be because the next main box should, like, if we follow Konami trend, should be 11-year box. And 11-year box is probably going to have some other really disgusting stuff in there. So,
Right. Hopefully there
uh,
is. This was my prediction, remember?
yeah,
Last month sometime I think we made a video and I said the New Year box. I think Rye
yeah,
said the next box, didn't you? What'd you
yeah. I
say?
said the next box.
I think that was the
Yeah, no,
Shark
that's.
Fang, wasn't it?
I think you're right. I think this is this New Year box, because this should be when 11-year comes out, and if that's when 11-year is coming out, I think they're going to go full force and just
Well,
here's
that's what they do
everything.
with the Stratos box, right?
Yeah.
The Shark Fang.
Well, I guess
Oh.
so.
No, it's the new year. We got to get something. So,
Yeah.
you think there'll be any Noble Knight stuff in there?
I kind of hope there isn't, just because I don't want to see the deck get nerfed. But a lot of people are saying Excalibur, which would pretty much solve, making yourself untargetable. One thing everybody seems to forget when they say this is fine for that deck to get, Excalibur is the only Noble Knight that doesn't have. If you read the lines, they say you can only have one of Noble Arm of Destiny equipped, for example. Right? You can't play 2 Destiny at the same time on the board.
Right.
You can play 3 Excalibur on one monster if you want to.
Okay.
Uh, so a common combo that TCG always used to do is literally Destiny double Excalibur, and then make the rank 4 to pop your own back row, so you can then later float with your Excaliburns from the grave if you go turn 1, so you just don't get OTK'd, period, right? Like, you have a untargetable, can't be destroyed once per turn monsters, and for them to out it, they'd have to Cosmic Cyclone both Excaliburns and then remove your monster from play or destroy it twice. That's not going to happen.
Oh my God. How
It's just not.
disgusting, right? How do you deal with that?
You don't, and that's why I think Excalibur isn't
Right.
going to come out in the game. I think it's just way too strong, and we people are like, oh, but we have Eye of Selene, and it's like, dude, Eye of Selene, you
It's
have to
not the
ramp up.
same.
You have to ramp up for 20 turns, and then yeah, you're good to go. This monster literally comes out super buffed already and can pop monster. Like, yeah, it's just not
Right.
gonna happen. It's just crazy if that's gonna happen. So
Are they going to
I could,
find their way into the meta though?
I think so. I think they'll be
Think
firmly in the
so?
meta. Yeah, I think once people
Like an
start to really,
outside deck? Are they really going to be a contender? Like
yeah,
gonna get a victory? Like they're gonna have to
I
beat Desperado in a finals.
yeah. So they will. Here's the thing: Desperado can't get lucky every game, right? Like, they
They're
can't
the
come of ace
masters
off the
of
top every
destiny. What are
time.
you talking about? It's not luck.
Yeah. The first 3 aren't luck, but after that, listen, when you
Right.
go double cup of ace into heads without a guaranteed heads, you got lucky. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right.
you won off of pure luck. Your deck shouldn't work to begin with, and it just happened. The matchup on paper does go to Noble Knights easily. You have to hard draw your karma cuts to out Noble Knights, and if Noble Knights go turn 1, you lose to them automatically. Even if you have your karma cut. The only way that doesn't happen is if you literally use up all your heads and still continue to get heads. Like, you're going to win every matchup if that happens. You'll
Right.
win the mirror match if that happens. That's just how the deck functions. So them having such a good Desperado matchup, if Desperado continues these crazy statistics, then yeah, it'll be easily in the meta, just like Witchcrafter will be easily in the meta. The only thing that I was concerned about getting them out of the meta is if the mini box was going to be garbage enough that it or no, the not mini box is going to be garbage. The mini box will be good, and then that's going to be another deck that Noble Knights have to contend with. But
Like battle and
now,
boxers. Yeah.
yeah,
They're
Battle
gonna.
and Boxers. So we don't have to worry about that. We're actually getting more support. The new rank 5, only Noble Knights can make that right now reliably.
Right.
And that's basically you pop one and then inflict battle damage, which is actually really good because now you can play through Temperance. If they have it in hand, they have it in hand. You just go in, pop their monster for lethal, and GG.
Right.
So I think you're going to see them firmly in the meta. Are they going to win a tournament? I sure hope so, because they pop off everywhere else except in side deck formats, which is really weird when you think about it. There's no like side deck card that really
Right.
destroys them.
They just have
Uh,
bad luck or something.
I think bad luck and just bad players. I think I see a lot of misplays.
Whoa.
Like,
Right.
like
Calling it out.
I'm just gonna say it, man. Like, we watch a lot of these duels, and it's just like I'm just scratching my head. Like, these are really, really weird plays. I talked to PDS about it too. Like, we just think people are not playing it well. When you
Okay.
see a good Noble Knight player, it's night and day between a bad one. For example, Mythiard is an amazing Noble Knight player, and he decimated a team, and it was
He
really brutal.
beat
It was very one
everybody
sided.
on the team.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
beat Blackwing, he beat, every deck that you say, "Oh yeah, I should be able to beat that Desperado." It doesn't matter. He was destroying them. So, um and even in damage step, they did pretty well in damage step. I think top 8, top 16 damage step, I don't remember. And that's with different builds even. So, I think when people start realizing the proper build, the 30 card build, stop playing the 20 card version. I think when people really start learning how to play the deck instead of, "Oh, I got this deck for cheap and I think it's super cool and fun to play." And when Desperado is firmly in that, driving seat of the meta, they're going to be better represented, hopefully.
So
In the
we'll
meta
probably
game.
see a lot of people that bought one copy of the
Oh my God.
Noble Knight structure deck, and
It's the new noob trap, man.
yeah, it's the new Red Eyes. Yeah,
Yeah. So if I had to pick the three go-to decks for this meta will be Desperado, Witchcrafter, and Noble Knights. I know Goki's one damage step, but I think that was more of a
Cinderella scenario.
just more of a, hey, I'm gonna play this build no one has quite understood yet, and you have 2 hours until this tournament ends to figure out how to counter it with your current deck.
Right.
And that was just extreme back row hate with summon breaker hate, stopping you from doing anything.
Yeah.
That build has topped a lot though, but I really do think it's more of it's like a Yosenju deck, you know what I mean? Like, haha, I gotcha. What are you gonna do?
Right.
And then you realize you're screwed, and it's like, I wish I could change my deck again and not lose to this. And you
Yeah.
know,
Yusenju's always just kind of like come out of the woodwork, do well, maybe even win a tournament, and then we don't hear from
yeah,
for
that's
months. So
probably that's probably where Goki is gonna be.
yeah.
Um, I just think heavy. I think this is a really bad meta for heavy back row, because when you have decks like Sidra and NK where they're popping back row like crazy, you don't really want to play heavy back row, even if you have that back row to potentially stop them specifically. If you play that much back row to stop those decks specifically, you're going to lose to everything else like
Right.
Desperado. So it's just very hard. It's kind of awkward for heavy back row. Instead of heavy back row, just play Karma Cut with Despo, draw 4, and Karma Cut your opponent. Call it a day.
Please don't do that. But people will. So
Yeah.
all right, I think that pretty much covers everything. We got a pretty good snapshot of what the meta has been. A rise prediction for the next week. We'll have to check back in a week. We'll have more data, more tournaments because we're doing what, like 12 a week now, and I know the meta freaklies are back to the side deck format. The meta weeklies back, so we're gonna have a lot of data coming in over this next week. So it'll be interesting to see how things shape up. So
Yep.
all right, we're gonna get out of here. I'm Circus. That's right. Wait, I forgot to do the
Nope.
whole outro. We gotta do the whole outro. Get in the Discord, new player channel, damage step, battle phase, rising sun. Now we can do the outro. I'm Circus. That's right.
Farewell.
All right. See you next time.